Hello and welcome to Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. I am Jennifer Helm, the Faithful Stamper, an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up. And today I have for you a little something different. This is a fun technique made with an ordinary household item, something that you would never in a million years think to craft with. Are you ready? Bubble wrap. Bubble wrap is how I made the background on this sweet little card. And so I'm going to show you tonight how a simple piece of bubble wrap can give you a little something different and fun for your card making. So what you will need is a piece of bubble wrap. It doesn't really matter the size of the bubble wrap as far as the size of the bubbles. I know there's different ones out there. I had a piece that was a lot smaller than this and I could have used that, but I went with what I consider standard bubble wrap. If you have ever gotten a Stampin' Up! Package though, and you've seen the bubble wrap that we use to protect our products, it's the quarter size bubbles. I wouldn't recommend that. I think it would be a little much. So what I call regular run-of-the-mill bubble wrap is probably what you want. And you basically need a piece of bubble wrap that is a little bit larger than whatever panel size you want to stamp with. Now, I have a sheet that's about 12 by 12, and what I did was I made a card with a color of ink on this corner, and then I wiped it off a little with a paper towel, and I turned it, and I stamped here, and then when I wanted to move to another color, stamped. So I made use of the whole thing, and then I threw it away when I was done. So it's up to you how you want to do this. It does get a little messy, so you might want to have a paper towel handy. And the first thing we're going to do, you need a piece of cardstock, whatever size panel you want for the front of your card. Now, for my example, I am using a piece that's 5 by 3 3/4. And so what I'm going to do is I like to lay it down next to my workspace here on the bubble wrap so I can kind of get a visual for how much ink I need to put down. I'm going to use a regular Stampin' pad, and I recommend a light color to start with until you get a feel for this. I wanted to make a different kind of sample, and I realized very quickly that the ink was too dark, so I actually went lighter so that you could get a feel for what I was doing here. So I'm just going to take this stamp pad, and I'm going to stamp directly on the bubble wrap. Now, one thing to remember is you don't want to overlap too much. The more ink you have, the darker it's going to get, but you want to have enough space to cover your whole paper. Otherwise, you might have some bits of the edges that aren't covered by the bubble wrap image, so just keep that in mind. So what I like to do, let's see, I'm going to put a little more ink than I need just so you can kind of get a feel for it. And I'm going to do 1, 2, and then 3, 4, and I think I missed a little spot here, so I'm just going to come back there. And you want a piece of bubble wrap, while I'm on the subject, that is, the bubbles are still full. If you have one that a lot of the bubbles have been popped, your design isn't going to come out quite how you intended it. So I'm going to drop my piece of cardstock gently right on top, right in the ink. And then I'm going to grab a piece of scrap paper and put that down over top. And if you have a sponge brayer or something like that at home, you can use it for this. You can even use your hand. But I grabbed a clear block, and I'm just going to hold my paper down at the bottom gently and then use my block to kind of smooth over my cardstock and make sure I'm getting a good image, getting good pressure all over. So now I'm going to put that to the side and very carefully pick up my panel. And I did pretty well with that. Looks like I missed one tiny little spot, but I'm going to roll with it. But there's my little background image. So I can use this kind of image for all sorts of cards. Now, here are 2 pointers where you might want to clean up for starters. If you'll notice, on the sides of your ink pad, you've got some little marks from the bubbles where you actually kind of overlapped with the ink. So what I recommend first is going ahead, even if you're going to reuse this, go ahead and close your ink pad up, grab a paper towel, and wipe the ink off the edges, because otherwise you're going to do what I did and get some on your hands, and the next thing you know, you've ruined something that you're working on. So just quick pointer there. And then if you're going to make more than one of these cards, you can obviously reuse your bubble wrap. I'm going to be honest, I did not try a wet paper towel with this, but what I did was I just took a dry paper towel and really kind of mopped off the ink before I worked on my second card, and that just cut down on the amount of ink, again, that was on my fingers. So for now, I'm going to put this to the side, and then a little more stamping before we start with the assembly on the card. What I wanted to show you was how this can work as a background panel. And I think I'm going to flip that around here like this. So I have Poppy Parade. This is a fun color combination. I like the petal pink and the Poppy Parade. But I wanted to stamp an image over top, and that's why if you use a darker color in the background, it's not going to work as well. So you want your dark color to be your focal image here. So what I'm going to do is just take this little floral bud image. This is from the Enjoy the Moment stamp set. And I stamped right over top of my background image, and I really like the way that looks. So now that I have that all done, I'm going to pull over, first of all, my card base. This is a piece of petal pink that's 8.5 by 5.5, so your typical half sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper. And I did pre-score it down the middle to have my card base. To this, I am going to add a panel of Poppy Parade, so you can see I'm really going with those two colors. And this, pardon my crookedness here, is 5.25 by 4. And so I'm going to layer this panel right on top. Just like so. And then once I have that panel on, now my stamped image can go right on the top. So I liked how this looked. I could have definitely stamped directly on here with my sentiment, but I decided to mix it up a little bit. So I am adding a cardstock strip of Poppy Parade. This is 1/2 inch tall by 4 inches wide. It can be plain cardstock, or you can emboss it if you like. I ran it through the Tasteful Textiles 3D folder. Not sure that's coming across super well on camera, but I could definitely have used a plain layer of cardstock as well. And I just decided I wanted to cover the very bottom here of this image, and it's actually going to work out kind of double because it's going to cover up where I'm missing a little bubble here and kind of take away from this down here at the bottom too. So, and if you are using the strip, I cut it to reach end to end on my layer there. And then I have my sentiment that I'm adding. I pre-stamped and pre-cut this. This is from that Enjoy the Moment stamp set as well, and one of the dies from the Tasteful label set. And so I'm just going to add some dimensionals to the back. These are our mini dimensionals, perfect for small little sentiment strips like this. Peel off the backing. And then obviously you can play around with your design and see where you would like to put your sentiment. I like mine here at the bottom. And then, finishing touch, the envelope and the inside. So, on the envelope, my ink pad wandered off, I covered it with bubble wrap. I'm going to go back to my petal pink for a moment and add another bud image from the stamp set. And there we go. So my envelope has a cute little accent now. And then from the Sunny Sentiments stamp set, we have a lot of tongue twisters in Stampin' Up! Land. I have a sentiment, hoping your birthday is filled with all the best things. So I'm going to stamp that in Poppy Parade, and then one last time come back to my petal pink and that bud image I just used on the envelope. And there we go. Now my inside sentiment is done. I'm going to close up my ink pads really quick. That way I won't accidentally drop my card in it once I make it. And then all I need to do is glue this to the inside, and my card will be ready to go. So this is just a fun technique. It's a little something different. And sometimes it's just fun to have a little something different. And I'm going to show you some samples next that show you can use this for all sorts of different occasions, all different types of cards. I did not make a Christmas card. I usually try to make at least one Christmas card with the technique, but I did not do that this time. So here is our light colored background, the card we made. But you have other options as well. You can play around with some fun color techniques and try experimenting with different colors. These are two colors I would not normally put together, but I decided to try Magenta Madness with one of the new in colors, Fresh Freesia, and I really like how that Fresh Freesia looks on the Magenta Madness card. So I simply added some die cuts from our Pierced Blooms set and a sentiment from the Sweet Ice Cream set. And I kept the inside rather simple. This has been my go-to sentiment for birthday cards lately. But just a fun card. This would be great for a teenage girl or anybody that's bright and cheerful that you need to send a card to. And here is another example of having that all over background technique. This was actually the color combination I was going to start with, and I got to thinking that this Fresh Freesia was just a little bit too dark for what I was thinking, so that's why I switched to the Petal Pink and the Poppy Parade. And I just used different die cuts to accent the front there. So you can just see how you can play around with the same idea and have a totally different look. And there's the inside, and I did add a little bit of bling for this one as well. Now, you're not just tied to a card with a background panel just as it is. For example, this one, I ended up having to trim the edges of my panel because I had missed a little bit along the edges, so I didn't want that to show, so I trimmed it smaller. And then I cut a circle out of it using our Layering Circles die. And I added one of the sheep from our Counting Sheep set, which is part of Celebration, if you're watching this video in August of 2021. If you do not currently have a demonstrator you're working with and you would like to see our brand new holiday mini catalog and our celebration brochure, which is good for August and September, reach out to me and I'd be happy to send you one. So back to the sheep, just a little bit of accenting with our Stampin' Blends. And then accent the inside. And a perfectly fun little card, very different from the cards that I made to start with. And I don't know if you're like me, but when I make something, if I cut a circle out, I don't throw that circle in the scrap bin. I gotta save that for something, right? Anybody with me? So I made a second card using that cutout here from the first card. Again, I went back to the cute little sheep, but I noticed on this card, I had a little spot here that's hidden by the balloons where my bubbles weren't quite full, and so I was missing a few. The image just didn't come out as clear. So it was perfect, number one, to cut that circle out, and then I was able to take that circle and hide it a little bit with the balloons, and nobody would ever know it was there, unless I didn't tell on myself, right? So just another fun little birthday card. Now, all these cards were made using a full-size ink pad, such as this one. Now, if you are a Paper Pumpkin subscriber or you've ever picked up some of our ink spots, they're about this big, about 1 inch square. They come in lots of different colors, and so you can use them as well. So instead of an all-over look, what you can do is take your Stampin' Spot and just swoosh it on the bubble wrap, and then you'll just have a stripe. Now, it just so happened, this was the first card that I made using the ink spot, and I ran across a piece of bubble wrap that was missing some of the bubbles in the middle. So this was perfect because I could adjust my card and then cover the missing piece, so to speak, with this little label. And here's another fun card. This would be fun for a young lady as well. And then one more idea with the Stampin' Spots, you can make a multicolored background. You could probably do this with the full-size pads, but it's a little trickier. It's easier to do with the mini Stampin' Spots because you can add multiple colors in different areas, and that's how you get the variegated background. What I did was I started light and I moved darker each time. I took a Pool Party Stampin' Spot and just kind of stamped a little bit in my target area. Then I switched to Just Jade and I could kind of fill in around. And then finally I added some Misty Moonlight. Definitely start with your lighter colors and work up to darker, because otherwise you're going to end up with dark ink on your light colored ink pads, and you don't want that. It's okay if it's vice versa, but I really like this card. This is one of my favorites that I made, with the different colors and just a couple of accents, and had a fun little birthday card. And then if you want to kick it up one more notch, you're not just tied down to inks. You can actually heat emboss. If you are familiar with the embossing technique where you use Versamark ink, which is basically a clear ink that has a little bit of stickiness to it, so you can pour embossing powder on it and then heat it with a heat gun to set it. And so for this one, hopefully this is coming across well on camera, you can see the shimmer from the embossing powder now that I've heat set it, and it's got a fun texture to it. It's very smooth, and so it kind of reminded me of fish bubbles, undersea bubbles. So I pulled out my Whale Done stamp set, added some accent colors and designer series paper, and with my little whale punch, and I turned this into a really sweet little baby card. So you do have lots of options with this card technique as well, and who would have ever thought that you could do this with bubble wrap, right? So I hope you enjoyed learning how to do something new today with a piece of bubble wrap you might have lying around your house. If you are a fan of Facebook, you can pop over there and follow me at The Faithful Stamper. And then I'd love it if you would also subscribe to my YouTube channel. I typically post videos here twice a week with different techniques. And I thank you so much for watching. It really means the world to me that you took time out of your busy day to watch my little video. Take care, everyone, and happy crafting.